Hi everyone. So as you can see, this video for today, we're going to be doing kind of a galaxy type of sky, and then we're going to have a tree and our silhouette of a unicorn. So I went ahead and just used a piece of cardstock and kind of traced out my unicorn and cut it out. So I'm going to need that for later. So I'll go over what we're going to use. I'm wearing gloves because this one we're going to use sponges for a lot of our background, so it gets kind of messy. You may want a few little sponges. These are just some little makeup sponge type things. So I have a few of them. So you can use any kind of sponge, just something small. If you got a big one, you can cut it. Any kind of sponge will do. Our paint that we're going to use, titanium white acrylic paint. You can see it up here. Then our dioxazine purple, our magenta, and then I'm just using a phthalo blue. And you'll also need black. So what I've done, I've gone ahead and painted my entire canvas black and let it dry. That's what we're going to do first. And you can use your hair dryer or whatever with it. You're also going to want an old toothbrush. So that'll come in later. I'll talk about that a little later, but you'll want an old toothbrush. So I poured in a little of each paint. You'll also need a few brushes later. Mostly, probably just maybe like a little small, that's a little flat angle brush, Liquitex Basic Angle Brush. And maybe this little flat 1/4 inch flat brush. And if you have any other just little small brushes, you don't need anything overly big. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to take my sponge, and we're going to keep it blacked in on the bottom, but we'll neaten up that edge later. I'm just going to dip into some of my magenta and just a hint of white with that, and it kind of makes a pinky color. And we're going to start our sky from the bottom and work our way up. So I'm just going to be tapping my sponge, and you can turn it different ways. Keep adding paint. We're just making kind of a mixy sort of sky. I'm not using a big lot of water with this. And I'm just turning my sponge as I go, different ways. Careful not to have too much paint on it so that it leaves big, thick blobs of paint. You're going to want to sponge it all out. Make sure your black underneath is really dry before you get started. I'm using an 11 by 14 stretched canvas, but you can use anything for this. Any size will do. And I'm going to start adding in some more color now, so maybe some purple. I'm going to add white to that, because if we just do our dark purple, it's not going to show up against our black sky. Purple and white. And as I move up my sky, I'll let it get a bit darker as I go. Maybe a little touch of blue. You don't necessarily have to wear gloves for this, guys, but I just get so much paint on my hands all the time that sometimes it's just easier. So I'm letting the colors kind of overlap, mix together. You don't have to keep them separate. Let them kind of mingle together. That's what's gonna look nice. Turn your sponge all different ways. I want to lighten up near the bottom where I'm going to have my silhouette of my unicorn and where our tree will be. If your arm gets hard, switch. I find when you're doing something like this with a sponge, it's easy to kind of switch around, switch your arms. When one gets tired, use the other one. So I'm keeping it lighter near the bottom. And as I go up, I'm using more of just our solid colors. So as I get near the top, I have some blue here. I'm gonna do more pink and purple up here. So I'm just gonna go into my pink and my purple. I'm just gonna give my sponge a tiny drop of water, and that will help us. Not too much water. You don't want it really runny. Try to keep it all the same. You don't want any thick parts of paint. No thick lumps or clumps. So I got my pink and my purple, and we can take a little blue at the same time. And guys, this is a great one. Kids can do this background. If you have a son or daughter that's interested in painting and you're not really sure how to get them started, show them this. You can teach them this. This is just sponging and keeping lighter down here and getting a little darker as we go near the top. Pink and purple. And if you like different colors, if you want to do blues and greens, that would be really nice too. So anything goes. Doesn't have to be pinks and purples. It can be whatever colors you prefer. And if you see something you don't like, or you see an area you want more color, you can go back over it, of course, and do whatever you want. Just giving my sponge just a little rinse just to get some of that paint out, and I'm going to go back with a little more white and pink. My sponge is a little bit damp there now, guys, just for adding this lightness here. Just a little bit damp, not real wet, just slightly damp. Alrighty, so that's where I'm going to go with my background. So guys, remember where I told you you needed an old toothbrush? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take some white paint on my toothbrush, just a little tiny bit of white paint, and I'll come to an empty paper plate. I'm just going to dip my toothbrush in some water, and I'm making just really kind of liquidy white paint, and we're going to flick this across our sky so that it creates a starry galaxy sky, just using my thumb. And now this can get a little bit messy, so just be careful of what's around you. You don't want paint splatters on. I'm in my painting room, so I can get paint everywhere if I wanted. And that's a real kind of starry galaxy. There we go. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to give this a blast with my hair dryer, because the next thing I want to do, I want to bring my black up for my land, do my tree, and then I'll draw my I'll pencil in my silhouette of my unicorn. So I'm just going to give it a little blast with my hair dryer just for a couple minutes, just so that all this dries nice now. Alrighty, so I think that's pretty dry. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to put some black paint. And I'm going to use my Liquitex Basic Mars Black. And it's the same as what's in the tube. I just buy it in a big crack because I use a whole lot of it. And I'll just take a little bit out. I usually use a palette knife. And I just take a couple little blobs of black out of my... And that should be enough. So everything else that we're going to do in this painting now is just done in black, guys. So first thing we'll do is take our silhouette and kind of decide where we're going to put it. And then I know where I can put my big tree then and see how much room I have. So I'm probably going to place him right about there. And you'll notice I don't have the horn on. We'll paint that in after. So I'm just going to take a little pencil and make a line. Let's see if we can see that. Yes. If you're using a pencil to trace out a stencil, just be careful you don't press too hard and poke it through your canvas. You just need a bare pencil line that you can see. Alrighty, so what I'll do, I'm going to take my small brush and I'll dip it in a little bit of water and my black paint. I'm just going to make my black paint just a little thinner, just because it's easy to smooth on. So a couple dips in my brush and my water, come back to my paint, and make a little puddle that's slightly thinner. Alrighty. And I'll get my outline as best I can. If you find it a little hard to see, just reference to your stencil as you're doing it. And remember, this is a black silhouette, and it certainly doesn't have to be identical to mine. When you're layering these paints on top of work we've already done, don't overbrush, guys. Be careful that you don't overwork it, because even though we dried that layer underneath, if you really keep brushing on that, you will pull the paint off underneath. So I always say learning to paint is oftentimes a lesson in self-control because it is. It's easy, and I find beginners sometimes think they need to brush a lot and really work the canvas hard to feel like they're doing something, but you don't. So don't worry, a little bit goes a long way. and a few brush strokes often go a long way too. So just kind of remember that. You don't need to brush and brush and brush and brush. Most times you're not really achieving anything. And I know I always talk about this and say the same thing, but it's true, and it's a very, very common thing that I run into. Another common thing that a lot of people say, I hear it all the time when people are learning to paint, is when they're doing something like this, especially, they say, oh, you know, I can see my brush strokes in my paint. And a lot of times, yes, you can with acrylic paint. You're going to see brush strokes, and we're using a paintbrush. So if you see brush strokes, I mean, it's impossible to, especially for a beginner, to do everything absolutely perfect and not see brush strokes. You're going to see them. It's just the way it is. So don't worry about it. It's a painting. You're using a brush. You're going to see your brush strokes. And that's okay. It still looks good. And there's so many different unicorn silhouettes, guys. You don't have to use one where he's like this. If you have another one, you can certainly go Google like a unicorn silhouette, trace it from there if you wanted. What I'll do, I'll take a picture of my silhouette, and I will put it on the feed, the Patreon feed, so you can see the photo of it. If you wanted to trace it from there, you can. Or, like I said, you can freehand, which I totally encourage. It helps you learn how to kind of get the shape down, but you don't have to. You can go on Google, you can go on Pinterest and just look up like a unicorn traceable or something like that. And we're just going to finish off his tail. I like to give them a big, fluffy tail. And I think I'm going to add a little more to the mane too. So if you find you're running out of your thinned out paint, just dip your brush a couple times in your water, come back to your paint again. You don't want it real, real thin, but you want it just workable, because if you're using thick paint from the tubes, sometimes it's way too thick to use. So by all means, go ahead and thin that out. Nice thick tail. I'm just going to add a little more. To the mane. And of course we can't forget our horn on our unicorn, so it's going to just be, I'm just going to use the same brush and just a little straight line there. Little point here at the top. And there's our unicorn silhouette, guys. Looks good. So that's our silhouette. I'm going to go to that small 1/4 inch flat brush, and just black paint, I'm just going to kind of neaten up my line. And we'll paint everything under that black as well. Just to kind of go over. When you do your toothbrush flicks, sometimes people will put a piece of paper or something under here, covering the bottom part, just so that they don't get the flicks on. But if you do, you could just go right over that again with some black paint. It's very simple. Alrighty, and now I'm just gonna put a tree in here. I was trying to decide what kind of tree I would want to do. I think maybe a big tall one kind of going off the top of the canvas. So I'm going to stick with that 1/4 inch flat brush. I'm going to give it a couple dips in my water, and I'm going to make some more black paint pretty thin. We want a nice kind of runny consistency, not watery, but just thin enough that it'll smooth on easy. Another dip in my water there. So I'm going to start my tree from the bottom. And the way I usually do a tree, I'll do one line and then I'll go back and thicken it up. So I know my tree is going to kind of come, and I'm going right off the top edge of my canvas. And then I'll come back and I'll kind of widen that out a little bit. Always remembering that a tree is usually wider at the base, and as it goes up and off our canvas, it gets thinner. So I'm turning my brush on its edge to make those smaller lines as we go up and off our canvas. We're not going to go too crazy with a ton of branches, but we'll do a few. Alrighty, and I'm going to just go back now to that smaller little angle brush and put a little bit of water with my paint, get it a little bit thinner. And let's see here, we'll do some smaller, I'm using the edge of my brush, so see that? Just using the edge of my brush to do some little small branches. Not going to do too many, but just a few to kind of fill in this top corner of our canvas. And you can see all those little stars poking through that we did with our toothbrush. Alrighty, let's see. You can widen that up a little bit here. Alright, do one there and there. Maybe here, coming right off the side. I'm just going to do a couple more little small ones. Just a few. And before we finish, we'll just look back at our black, see if there's anywhere you kind of need to touch up a little bit. Now's the time. Make sure it's nice and black. Anywhere here. Smooth out any real thick lines, but just do a few small lines, that's enough. And just to end it off, I'm going to do a little bit of grass detail. Same little tiny flat angle brush, just our black paint. I'm just going to come along by the edge of my tree. I'm just pulling out some little, so when I do that brush stroke, I kind of press harder and then I flick. So press and flick up, relieve the pressure. Don't press hard the whole way or you'll get a real big thick line. But if you just press and then flick it out, you should be able to get these little small thin grassy pieces. And I'm going to come along the whole way. Little small ones here, not as big as over by our tree, just some little short grassy pieces the whole way. And there we go. So that is our unicorn silhouette with our galaxy sky. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day.